Hello, everyone, and welcome to another YouTube video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. We've got another college football playoff preview. This one's between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the visiting Tennessee Volunteers from the SEC. I am your host, Sean Vowells, and joined with me is Joe Meade. And Joe, Ohio State makes the college football playoff, but the fans aren't exactly happy. First off, they are hosting this game. And for just about every other team in the country, that would be a surprise. Tell me how Ohio State might have preferred this to be a neutral court or a neutral game.
Yeah, Sean, one thing I'll tell you is this is the angriest fan base probably in playoff history. Now, you could tell me the 2022 version of Ohio State was angry, but I don't think it even holds a candle to what it is now because 2022 Ohio State, they were in the 14 playoff, meaning they were a game away from the national title, and
That
it ended
Michigan
up
team
being,
was elite too. That wasn't
yeah,
a yeah.
absolutely, and it ended up being a field goal away from winning the national title. This time it's 4 games away from a national title, and probably the hardest path, aside from Tennessee, only because they have to go to the horseshoe. Ohio State spent around $20 million. I don't know the actual number, but that's what it's highly been guesstimated at to win the Big Ten and beat Michigan. You have 3 goals at Ohio State. This is very clear in the Midwest. You beat the team up north, you win the Big Ten, you win the national title. Now, the last goal, most people are appreciative of if you could get the first two done off the table completely. Ohio State's sole shot at redemption is winning it all. And that sounds absolutely insane because there are teams that would kill to just be in the title game and lose by 50. Ohio State is not one of those teams, especially with the conditions this year. Why I recap all this, because I don't think this even needs a recap for Ohio State season. Why I say this is because that means the pressure's on from the fans. And if
Yeah,
you think those kids don't feel it, I really don't know what to tell you.
I think most of the other fans, Joe, are sort of going to be, maybe not just happy to be there, but thrilled to have a chance to root for their team on their home field in the playoff. I think Ohio State, like if they, it's kind of a lose lose situation. If you win, you were supposed to because you were at home, and if you lose, well then that makes it two straight losses at home. But like we said, the Michigan game was very mental. They had a big game the week before the Michigan game, and they looked really good in it because they weren't really thinking about Indiana; they were thinking about Michigan. So, we'll see. We'll see. What did Ohio State learn from that Michigan game? They played it very safe, and the sort of air. I don't want to call it air raid, but Will Howard has two of the best receivers in the country. You got to get them involved early in Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith. They are at home against the Tennessee team that comes from the SEC. Joe, both teams come in at 10-2. Ohio State with that 1 point loss at Autzen Stadium against Oregon. Boy, would they like a rematch. And then that home loss against Michigan. Tennessee comes in at the same record of 10-2. They did lose to Georgia on the road and to Arkansas on the road. So they have not, they still picked up a number of impressive victories on the road, whether it was against Oklahoma, NC State, or Vanderbilt, a couple teams that won some games this year. But Ohio State favored by a touchdown. I would say that on season as a whole, that's probably fair. But considering what Ohio State did last week, Joe, how important is the first drive or two of this game?
The first score in this game will decide it, and I mean first touchdown. I'm not talking field goal. I am so serious when I tell you if Tennessee scores a TD, there will be booze in the horseshoe. And people who don't believe me, ask anyone who was there at halftime when Ohio State was 10-10 against Michigan. Keep in mind, tie game, just went down the field and scored. Fan base started to turn on them. Fan base started to get nervous. Now you can tell me, oh, that's because it's the Michigan game. It's a completely different animal. Well, now take that game and the result of that game and put it on top of the magnitude of this game. That's a double whammy. And everyone says, "Oh, that's the Michigan fan in you talking." Ask any Ohio State fan, and you're going to understand instantaneously what this first score is going to mean. I think if Tennessee scores first, their defense kind of sees blood. I think with James Pierce Jr. and that busted that still very injured Ohio State offensive line without McLaughlin and with 2 of 5 starters out, I think Tennessee's been looking at their chops at that the entire 3 weeks when prepping what'll be the entire 3 weeks when prepping for this game, or 2 weeks rather. So if I'm Ohio State, this first quarter garbage where you don't start well, whether that was Penn State, whether that was Indiana, whether that was Michigan, you cannot afford that at all. You have to start this game the way you started the Oregon game. You have to come right out with the home crowd behind you and punch Tennessee in the mouth. That's how you win the fans back. After about 3.5 weeks of turmoil, that's how you win them back.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
I would say, Joe, similar to our last video when we talked about Penn State, I think you take a deep shot, maybe on the first play, even. Ohio State's offense has looked the best this year when they are spread out and they get as easy coverage on their wide receivers as they can. It's sort of the opposite, right? Most teams like to establish the run and then the passing game will come. I think it's sort of the other way around with Ohio State. They did not run the ball well against Michigan. They did not really spread it out. And the only possession that they looked good was the 2-minute drill when they were up against the clock. I mean, maybe don't run your 2-minute drill offense on this first drive, but take some shots, maybe some tempo, run some no huddle, and put. If they punch first and they have a 6-minute drive and they're up 7-0, Joe, I think we could see Ohio State winning this game rather easily. But unless they do that, any close game is certainly Tennessee's favor. Nico Iamaleava is a great quarterback. I'm not sure he really gets the edge over Will Howard, but there's certainly a way that Tennessee takes the lead. Ohio State has to play from behind in front of their home crowd, and Tennessee is certainly a good enough team to go in there and win. That's without a question. They're one of the best teams in the SEC. They beat Alabama. I mean, they beat some really good teams this year. They're deserving of their spot in the college football playoff. But barring a first possession score, Joe, I'm not feeling too hot about Ohio State here.
Yeah, one thing I'll tell you about Tennessee's offense is, and Josh Heupel's offense as a whole, first time we're ever going to see it in quite the frigid, like sub 25-degree weather at a night game in the shoe. One other thing to consider, I think Dylan Sampson's a heck of a running back. I think with that kind of weather, they're going to really rely on him. And don't get it twisted. Ohio State did a great job shutting down Indiana's run game, albeit the Khalil Mullick's run, absent of that, which was a freak enough play. I'm a Michigan fan enough to admit it. They did a great job shutting down Michigan. So what's that all mean? I think that means if Nico gets going in any way, if the quick passing gets going, Ohio State's defense is going to be opened up a lot. And I think that's going to let Dylan Sampson run all over Ohio State, and I think that'd be very bad. On the flip side of that, though, is if Jim Knowles, who's done an outstanding job, even in the Michigan game, done an outstanding job most of the year, if he can just get them, Tennessee, to not establish the run at all and to force Nico to pass, I'm not saying they're going to sack him. I don't think Ohio State's pass rush is anything too crazy, but the coverage is good enough, and they'll get there in time where Nico's going to be forced into a lot of decisions. And I do think with Caleb Downs back there, they could get a turnover or two, which will sway this game. I think turnovers in this game are an even bigger factor than it was for Ohio State in the Michigan game. That's why if I'm Will Howard, when I'm running, I'm extra tucking that ball.
And Joe, Ohio State's defense has played pretty well, even in their losses. To give up 13 points to Michigan, had you told people that, you're like, all right, Ohio State won 30-13. Obviously, that didn't happen. And the reason why Ohio State's been able to get away with a couple of these slow starts is because it's been 7-0 midway through the second quarter. Or, Tennessee has the firepower to put 14 on them in the first quarter. And if they start out slow, they'll be playing from behind. But on the flip side, Ohio State is probably the best defense that Tennessee has seen this year. I mean, Georgia is a pretty good defense. Alabama, both those teams can have a few flaws defensively. Kentucky has a pretty good defense. They got 28 on them. But, all but once, Joe, have they failed to get to 20? So I just don't really think Tennessee is bad enough to get beat pretty handily here. I do think this will be a close game. I do think Ohio State will win. I think there'll be a couple nervous moments, maybe even a second-half lead from Tennessee, but I do have Ohio State winning 27-24.
Yeah, Sean, I think this is actually be a pretty low-scoring game where field goals are going to matter. And, if you're Jane Fielding, this could be your ultimate redemption game. I think Ohio State wins this game by a score of 20-17. I think Ryan Day, to an extent, takes a lot of shots, but I do think he recognizes that with the lead, which I believe Ohio State will score first, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. In spite of their entire month of November, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that they will throw the first punch in this because I will give this condition. If Tennessee scores the first touchdown, Tennessee will win the game.
Yeah.
And that sounds so crazy, but I'm willing to put a lot of money on that because uh, I don't think an Ohio State team being down 7-0 following a loss to Michigan and no Big Ten title with that amount of money on the roster will feel that kind of pressure. And that's a BS thing to say, but I don't think it's ever really happened before. This is the first and maybe only time this happens based on how this goes. But Ohio State, I believe they score first. I believe they make enough plays on defense, and I do believe their offense plays a little conservative, albeit that'll be justified with the lead, and they allow their defense to win the game late in the game.
I think, Joe, that if Tennessee gets the ball first and scores, maybe that's a little different. But if Ohio State gets the ball first and doesn't score, I think that's when the nerves start to set in. I'm gonna go first to 10 wins this game. Who's able to put two good possessions together first? One, turnover or a mistake could give the other team points, but first to 10 is something that I look out for here. If Tennessee is able to get to 10 first, that means that they've put together two pretty good drives against Ohio State's defense, and you'd think that would continue, but this is definitely going to be the closest of the semifinals to me. I do think Ohio State is the better team. They are playing at home at night, 8 o'clock on Saturday on ABC. And, Joe, this just seems like a monkey on the back situation. If they're able to beat Tennessee here, they might win the whole thing. It's really not talent or ability at all. They were 1 second. If Will Howard slides 1 second earlier and they call a timeout, they have a field goal to win on the road at Oregon. So I think they want that rematch, and that forward thinking might help them in this game because when they were looking ahead of Indiana to Michigan, they swept Indiana aside. If they're looking ahead to Oregon here, that might serve them a little better. Now, the situation is a little different. Obviously, if you had lost that Indiana game, you weren't going home. Obviously, if you lose this one, you are. But if Ohio State is the team that we think they are, they were the favorites to win the national championship for most of this season. That team wins this game without question. But it's really going to come down to, did they learn anything from the Michigan game, and can they bounce back? Because in most years, teams that put that sort of performance on the field as their second loss don't get another chance. But lucky for them, they do.
Yeah, Sean, I think I'll wrap up with this. This is the most important game of the Ryan Day era, and it becomes that especially if they lose because it could be the final one. And I'm not saying he gets fired. I'm saying at that point, the pressure cooker's so intense, why would he stay? But one thing I'll say is I really think Ohio State will win this game. I think their senior leadership will step up, whether that's a Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Travion Henderson, Emeka Ibuka. I think those guys have played in enough big games, and frankly, they've won a lot of big games. Take away the Michigan game, they've won huge games against Penn State. They've won huge games against Notre Dame. They've been in pressure situations, and for all you want to make fun of Will Howard about, I do think if he runs the ball effectively, that could be another X factor in this game, and maybe if Will Howard runs well in this game, I think Ohio State could win by 2 scores. It's a matter of is he going to get hit early the way he did against Michigan, and are they going to be hesitant about it? And are they going to trust him? That's the biggest thing. If he throws a pick early, will they trust Will Howard the way they didn't against Michigan?
And Joe, many Ohio State fans will say that losing to Michigan is unacceptable, especially this version of Michigan at home. I mean, if they win the national championship, there's not a much better way currently to wash that taste out of your mouth. Obviously, many people will think that the beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten is more important, but they still have a chance to win the national championship. That hasn't gone away yet. And of course, Joe, the winner will be meeting Oregon in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Eve or day. Not sure when that game is, but a chance to play the best team in the country is on the line for the winner here. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into this preview. We'll be back a couple days after the game to recap it. Check out the other videos if you haven't already, too. We'll see you next time.